Hey everybody, welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Maple Syrup time, and I am Sen, and that's Hafiz. And over here we have our very special guest, Chris Stone. So happy is it happy anything? It's happy almost March to people, I guess, right? That's
Absolutely.
happening in at least Canada. It's March break next week. So Hafiz and I will actually be at the same convention for the first time in a while. I mean, we're at like the Proto TOs and stuff like that, but Breakout Con is happening next weekend in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So if you are in the area, come find me. I look like this. Go find Hafiz, who looks like that. And if you're in Vancouver, I will be there on Friday this week for TCTC, which is Terminal City Tabletop Convention. They have a really cool logo that I want to get a shirt because it's almost like a metro line because it's about the terminal line of the train. Anyway, I'll be there. I'm judging the Golden Arbutus
Ooh,
competition, which sounds fancy,
Does sound
oh,
fancy.
very
but
fancy.
I'm the one judging it, so it's probably not that fancy. And Jay, my co-design partner, will be there. We're going to show off a bunch of our new stuff. Um, and then when we're at Breakout Con, Alara Cameron, my other co-design partner, will be there. She's a special guest of the event, and she'll be doing some stuff with a few of our more recent games. So she'll be demoing Grendel, and I think she's also running a competition or a yeah, like a play to maybe not a play to win, but what do you call it? Tournament. That's it. A tournament for our game Lupin the Third, which is uh, it's underneath a bunch of stuff. I would grab it, but then things would fall, and then I'd get crushed under that, and there'd be no co-host.
Whole
So,
show would be
anyways,
over.
yeah, the whole show would be over. So, welcome to the show, Chris. How are you?
Thank you, Sin. I'm doing great. Doing great. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, it's
Hmm.
great to have you on here.
Yeah, Hafiz, tell us why Chris? Why did you
Oh,
I like Chris,
I
but why
ask
do you
myself
like
that
Chris?
so often. Yes.
many reasons to have Chris on. One, he's just an awesome gentleman. Um, two, he's a fellow game designer, and three, he's probably one of the most positive people in the designer space. And today we're going to be talking about community in the space and why it's so positive, what makes it so different from so many other spaces. So who better than to talk about this topic than Chris?
Oh,
There you go.
Thank you, Hafiz.
So, Chris, before we get started on that topic, let's learn a little bit more about you as a person, as a designer. How did you get into gaming? How did you get into game design? Why did you choose this rocky road? Uh,
What was I thinking?
yeah,
It sounds almost like you want my origin story.
I do. I
Very
do.
good. Well, yeah, I mean, my background in gaming originally was as a kid. You know, I played family games with my family. I remember playing Clue with my family, and I remember the time when my mind was just blown when my dad explained to me that if you pick two things to ask about that you already have in Clue and one that you don't know about, like this is he unlocked the secret of deduction in Clue, and it sort of opened my mind to the idea that you can sort of puzzle these things out in a really interesting way. So that was probably my earliest gaming, and then of course I was a big RPG guy as a kid in the '70s. Not to date myself, but original D&D, you know, did a lot of that, and then lots of other RPGs all the way through college, and then kind of didn't really do a lot of gaming for many years until my brother actually sent a copy of Pandemic to my kids as like a Christmas present. They could not have been any less interested in Pandemic, but I was divorced at the time, dating a woman who is now my wife, and I took it to her house and said, "Let's check this out." And we played Pandemic, and we just totally fell in love with it and got all the expansions and basically sort of that was our courtship activity, was playing Pandemic and Pandemic Legacy, and so yeah, that got me back into gaming, and then I started my own collection, got a lot of games played, and started the thing that actually launched me into wanting to try and design my own game was that we wanted to play Pandemic sort of everywhere. We would, take the kids to the skate park, or we'd go to the laundromat or something, and it'd be like, this is really inconvenient to set up a big tabletop game, in these places. I'm sitting in my car. I want to make a game. So I started thinking, I wonder if I could sort of like design my own game that was like with magnets, where stuff would kind of stay where you put it. And that was, I was down the rabbit hole at that point, starting to design a game. And I did design a game with magnets, and it was about 3 times larger than Pandemic, and no way could fit safely in a car or in a laundromat. So, but yeah, I was down the rabbit hole at that point, and have been a game designer ever since.
You've also published some games. I know Hissy Fit.
Yep.
Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Of course, yeah. So this was my I had pitched several games. I took lots of sell sheets to lots of conventions and met with a lot of publishers. Didn't really have too much luck getting my work published. Of course, it's always an uphill battle. There's so much stuff getting put in front of publishers every day, and it's just hard to stand out. But you know, I think that basically decided that the best way to get published was to do it myself. And so went down that path. I know a lot of people have gone down that path for better or worse, and had a lot of, or several different playtesting groups that I was involved in. And one of my playtesting partners was Levi Robertson, who's a fantastic designer in his own right. He and I teamed up. I had this idea for a game about getting your cat in the carrier to take to the vet, and he thought that was hilarious. And we just sort of decided this is the game we were going to take on to co-design and publish together. And we did. We had a successful Kickstarter. I mean, a modestly successful Kickstarter. Ended up printing 3,000 copies of that game, and fulfilling about 1,000 of them to our backers, and have now sold through the rest of that inventory in the intervening time. And in fact, just licensed the game to a friend of ours who's also a publisher, a small publisher like us, sort of a one-man shop, who was publishing his own games, Matthew Cambick of Maca Games, and he licensed Hissy Fit from us. And so he's doing new development work on a second edition, or second printing at least, and I think he's going to be making some small changes. And he's just got a lot more energy than I do. So we felt like we had achieved what we wanted. Levi and I had achieved what we wanted to do with Hissy Fit, and we're happy to hand it off to someone to take it to the next generation of whatever it was going to become.
Did you ever think that you'd have, like, somewhere in the realm of 5,000 copies of your game floating around?
I definitely did not. Although, I mean, well, let me take that back. When you first start into game design, of course, you've got the most brilliant game ever, and so it's going to be a household name, right? But as reality set in, there were definitely times when I never thought, when I thought I would never have a game on store shelves. But it has been very satisfying to go to other towns, and I live in California, going to the East Coast and to visit my brother, and going into a game store and seeing my game on the shelf there. So yeah, very fun.
Yeah, that's really cool. Hey, Deadpan, how are you? So you've gone from a designer to self-publisher. You have a podcast, correct? Or a video? It's a podcast,
No,
isn't it?
no. So I have an idea.
Oh,
I
okay.
am hoping. But I'm glad you asked about it, because I'd be curious for your take on whether
Sure.
this is a good idea or not. So I had an idea for a TikTok channel, and and
Oh,
maybe a YouTube channel. Basically a brand where I could do some content. And my idea was, and this ties exactly right into what we're talking about today, because
perfect.
I don't really want to try and create. I don't think I'm interesting enough to try and create enough content for lots of people to want to come and consume my channel. But I thought it would be really fascinating to open up a channel that contained the content from lots of different contributors all around the board game design space. And I was going to call this Game Design Fool, the Game Design Fool. And so I was going to be the Game Design Fool, of course, and basically just open an invitation for anybody who wanted to submit little 30 to 60-second clips of their game design wisdom, observations, questions, processes, prototyping tips, anything that they wanted to contribute to the game design full ecosystem, and allow folks to contribute. Now, I've sort of been on pause with this project because I know that lots of people are creating their own content to try and grow their own brand. So I don't know how popular this would be, but yeah, I'm curious to hear if you guys think this would be an interesting way to build a community around game design.
I like the idea of the fact that you are trying to find a space and make a space to have people give back. Like it's
Mhm.
not about
Mhm.
you're not building your own brand right now. It's more about, in fact, you called yourself a fool. So it's clearly not.
Exactly.
It's not about building out like, hey, look at Chris and his ego, because you can't do that when you have fool labeled on. But to just say like, hey, what's something you've learned along the way that we can share with
Yeah,
other people, so then they can learn along with you, which I think is a very cool idea.
very good. I am
Yeah, I think
remotivated, and
approaching things.
sorry, Sin, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that no, it's okay. I think approaching things from a viewpoint of like curiosity and inquiry is really a good way to position yourself, not as like the expert or the sage on the stage, but you can learn from like anybody and everybody, which is kind of like what Maple Syrup's about, as well. That we just have people coming to talk about stuff, and we're here to learn, and everybody has something good to offer. These little
Love
iotas
that.
of wisdom that, yeah, we can't find by if we're not open to learning, right? And I do think like having a space where you're hosting and or curating and or
Mhm.
you know at least like somewhat responsible for
Mhm.
that channel, but you're not creating all the content. I think is wise. Um, it's kind of like more like it's not like a network where you have to have like I have to have this much content all the time, because that
Right.
grind becomes real. As somebody who
Exactly.
does a podcast and this live show, it becomes an issue. That's why I did the live show actually, because we don't edit it. We just kind of it is what it is. Robot
You're taking the easy
Hafiz
way
talking
out,
to
Sin.
robot Sen. Well, somewhat. It can get difficult to like constantly do bookings, which is what
Of course.
Hafiz has taken over, which is great. But doing all the other technical stuff and putting up all the flyers and whatnot, it can get to be a grind. So if there is something that you can do that still contributes but doesn't cost you as much, and I'm not talking money, I'm talking like effort and time,
Exactly.
then it's probably worthwhile in some way, shape, or form. Until people find it not worthwhile, and then you stop, and that's okay too, right? So,
100%.
yeah. So, in talking about community and the board game design community, first and foremost, how did you really find yourself? Well, okay, let's go back, way back. Let's take the way back machine. And we are back day one. Baby Chris has made his first game, and he is meeting with other people for the first time, not his friends, not his family, who are playing like not published games. What was that like?
Right. Yeah, that was definitely mind blowing. So, um, my the first thing I wanted to do to educate myself as I started taking steps into game design was I told myself I need to find a podcast to listen to, because that's a way that I like to consume content. And so the first one I found was Gabe's BGDL, Board Game Design Lab podcast, which
Hmm.
so many of us have benefited from. And so that was really where I kind of discovered the community, because, of course, from there I discovered the Facebook group, which is such a great positive space. Um, and one of the first things I learned about on the podcast was this idea of protospiels, places to go and test, where everybody's testing their own designs. And so I went to my first protospiel here in California. I think it was in Santa Clara, and yeah, it was just a really eye-opening experience. Putting my game on the table, being terrified, not knowing what to expect. The first person who walked up to me said, "Tell me about your game." And I said, "Well, it's a cooperative." And she said, "Yeah, no thanks," and turned and walked away. I was like, "Oh no." I was like, "That's totally fair. Thanks for stopping by the table." But we had great feedback that at that event, and had so many people sit down. I've still some of my most like treasured photos of my protospiels are from that first event where people were just loving my game, and it was fantastic. Yeah, protospiels are
And
great.
was that Hissy Fit that you were playing at that time?
No, that was my magnetic game that I was going to be able
Oh,
to play in a laundromat. It was called The Clockwork Maze of Professor Blunderbuss, and
That is an amazing name.
it's right. I still have high hopes for this game at some point. It's a game with lots of gears and magnets, and it'll never be publishable because it would cost $5,000. But no, I think there's a way to. I think my having grown a lot as a designer, I think I can streamline it to the point where I can make it into something that can be published and be pretty cool and unique and have some
yeah.
cool hooks.
I mean, there's also the option of like things like the indie night market, where it's like it would cost you $60 to make it by hand,
Right.
and you could sell it for like $65, you know,
Right. Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
like be happy that it's out there and the 20 people who have it love it, you know?
So it's interesting you say that, Sin, because another project that I'm really interested in right now, in fact, one that I've just kind of soft launched as a Facebook group, um, is sort of around bespoke stuff, and I'm not quite sure what it's going to become yet, but I'm my working title for it is Letters from the Back Porch Swing, and it's sort of about mail drops and coziness and mindfulness and sort of generosity. And so I'm kind of interested in this idea of thrifting stuff and making games out of thrifted components and vintage components. And there's only one copy just like this, and it goes off to one of our subscribers. And maybe a different version of the game would go to someone else. So I don't know. I'm still toying around with it. You can
That's
tell I've got
interesting.
way too many ideas.
Yeah, yeah, you do. But they're all
It's a
good.
sign,
They're also
sign of a
really
good
neat.
designer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating that there is the opportunity for some of these things. So I know if you know Scott Rogers,
Of
Scott
course.
did a project where he made like a few copies. I don't know how many, I can't remember, of a few games that he was working on, just to kind of like, I need to get these out of my head, they need to be real, and here you
Yeah.
go. And that's great. I know John Gilmore at one time, I think he was doing like a Make 100 project,
Mm,
where it's just like, I'm gonna make 100 copies of the game, and that's it, that's all there are. And I think things like that are really cool. They're artisanal, right? They're
exactly.
these unique things or semi-unique things, right? That won't be reproduced easily or often, if at all. And I think of like things like lithographs,
Mm,
and printmaking and things like that, where this is number 73 of 150 copies,
right.
and that's all there will be of this print run of it. And I think that's art, and I'm okay with games being art. Like, I think games are art more than product.
Here, here.
I am forced to think of them like a product because
Right.
part of my income comes from it. But I would rather not and never do that. And I was talking on, I think, BGDL about that. No, no, no. It was on Tabletop Game Designers, um, one of the
Guild?
groups that the guild that I manage,
Yeah.
actually.
Hmm.
And somebody was asking the very philosophical question, about art versus product. I said to somebody cynically, and it's not very cynically, it is cynical in some ways, but it's also really just true, that when you can afford to look at your stuff as art, you're either, that starving artist, or you are so elevated that there's other people caring about the product and the marketing and all that kind of stuff. So you don't have to worry about, is this art or not? It just is, because somebody else is worried about selling it. And I think when you are worried so much about selling something, unless you are into that part of the process of, slimming down the profile of your box and
Right.
making sure that you get the best meeples for the best dollar value and all that kind of stuff. uh, you know, I just like making the game. I just like designing the game itself, and somebody else can think about all the rest of those things. So, um, so yeah, so you had your first experience at the Protospiel. You realized that, wait a minute, even the woman who said no, thank you, was pretty cool, and this community is
Absolutely.
is is welcoming, and you weren't driven away by people giving you potentially, difficult to hear feedback. Um, what is it about the game design community that you think is the draw? Like, why would you recommend people who are looking for community to get into the game design community if they're also into the game design, right?
Sure. Well, I think that the reason to get into, I think it's almost a little bit of the opposite. I'll take the question from the sort of the opposite direction. Um, in, Diving into anything new is daunting,
Hmm.
and and you're going to need help. And there are a lot of realms of our life, and even realms of like art, different activities, different hobbies, different industries, different things that we can be interested in and want to spend our time and passion and money on, um, where there isn't a welcoming community. So I almost feel like, rather than why should they get into, engage themselves with the game design community, I think it's almost like, um, you're really blessed in this situation, that if this is the thing that you've decided to do, you have a really welcoming community to lift you up, and that is not going to be a discouragement like it might be in a lot of other arenas. And so I think it's we're just very lucky that the community that we have around game design happens to be well, for reasons we'll probably talk about. I don't think it's a coincidence, but I think that we're very fortunate to have that supportive infrastructure backing us up.
Did you ever have a moment while you were engaging with other game designers in the community where you just stopped and you thought to yourself, "Oh, oh, this is different from some of those spaces you mentioned that can be somewhat competitive."
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, well, like I mentioned before, the fact that I stumbled first into the BGDL community um, was really sort of the moment when I had that, oh wow, this is different kind of experience. Everybody in that Facebook group hasn't been and continues to be um, so dedicated to sort of the philosophy that the rising tide raises all boats, right? And really it has been so generous that I just think that the ethos of generosity around that whole community um, is one that we can all benefit from. And I think that uh, I'm sure there are game design and board game design communities that are maybe not quite as welcoming or not as positive as that one happens to be. But honestly, I haven't really found I haven't really found that to be the case. I mean, I, I think that it's just I think there's a lot of reasons why the board game design space, in particular, is sort of set up to be a really positive and encouraging space.
I think the community itself, and the people that make up the community kind of are a certain breed, specifically in board games for some reason. Do you notice that, Chris? Do you notice that there's some key differentiators between, say, another type of design community or even an adjacent design community like trading card game community versus
Mm.
board game community? Is there a difference? Have you noticed it? Are you part of any of those other ones?
Yeah, I'm not really. I think that just from sort of reputationally, I think that the video game space is just brutal. I mean, my sense, and there are people in our community probably who could speak to this better than I can. Uh, Folks who have done game design. In fact, Scott Rogers could probably talk about this. The difference between the video game design space and the board game design space. But my understanding is that that is a really competitive, really sort of secretive sort of process. I mean, you're dealing. largely probably because of the amount of money that it takes to, put a video game, or especially a high end video game, together. It requires a big corporation and trade secrets and NDAs, and I think it's just a whole different vibe. I think part of what makes the board game community able to be so um, uh, opposite that, to not have to be so competitive, is that it is more of a cottage industry in a way. It's a relatively small community. Everybody knows each other, or it's easy to know lots of people in the community if you choose to. I mean, you can go to just about any convention, certainly the big ones like Gen Con or Origins or something like that, and you can meet your heroes, right? You can meet the publishers of your favorite games and the designers of your favorite games, and so it makes the community feel very small and tight knit. And I think that's something really special about it. Um, so yeah, I think there's quite a few reasons why, and not to step on future questions, but I'll just dive a little bit into this. I think that part of why that is, and maybe why the board game design space is different from some of those other creative spaces, is just that we do rely on each other, right? Like our games are never going to are never going to reach their full potential if we don't show them to people, and if we don't accept the generosity of other people to test our games and to give us feedback, and if we're not generous toward them to do likewise. We were talking about protospiels. I think protospiels have a very intentional culture of being, of asking each player or each designer who's engaged in a protospiel activity to be a player more than they, to be a player of other people's games more than they have their own game tested at any given event. And so I think that's that ethos of, you know, is sort of baked into those events and starts to get into designers' heads pretty early, that you're expected to give more than you take from the industry.
Hmm. And I think that whole ethos, and really, it's like a code of conduct almost, right? It's like
Exactly.
these are the rules of engagement in this space. You cannot just come play test and leave
Right.
without
Play
at
test your
least,
own game.
yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
at least play testing one or two more games, please and thank you very much, right? Yeah, you paid to be here, but part of that is so that you're also a playtester for other people's games. I've actually had some people, say like, I am going to be with my game, but I've brought these 20 other people that'll playtest everybody else's games. It's like, I guess that's okay. I guess, but it's a little bit weird, but it's okay. They just want
They
to really playtest their game a lot, I
they've
guess.
outsourced their part of the playtesting.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, honestly, if they've done that in good faith and they really have brought a big cadre of people who are going to come and play everybody's games, they probably contributed more than more than most. So
Yeah, I guess it depends on the quality of feedback that you were hoping to
for
get,
sure,
though,
for
right?
sure.
So there's something different about like a designer playtesting event,
Yep.
where it's not like public facing all the time.
Well,
Yeah,
and the other thing, if I can just add one more
Yeah,
thought to
of
that, is that
course you can.
I think that really that person sort of cheated themselves, right? Because you gain at least as much by being a playtester of other people's designs as you do by having your own design play tested. And so I think maybe they gave back more than they took, but they probably did themselves a disservice by doing it in that way.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to learn from being part of another person's playtest. Like, how
yeah,
did
just
they playtest things? How do you give feedback? All that kind of stuff.
yeah, and even the metacognitive part of it, like how did this person think through this problem and then apply it in their game design? Like, oh,
Hmm.
that's really interesting that they took this approach. I wouldn't have in 100 years thought of that on my own, and that can percolate and it can give you some ideas maybe to solve a problem you've had in the past or spark a new idea for a game that you're planning on working on. But you mentioned that a lot of games they're not made in isolation. You are playing with other people. You're getting feedback. Feedback comes in many different forms, and I think for it to be constructive um, is actually a pretty important and sometimes difficult skill. for some background, Sen is a professor, and I was a teacher in another life, and so feedback is something that's always been really important. I think a lot of game designers tend to have a teaching background from time to time too. Um, when is there something at these protospiel events that just kind of fosters more of a constructive rather than destructive feedback loop when we're sharing?
That's a good question. I mean, we've all gotten crushing feedback, right? But I think when you step away and you're given time to reflect, I think we all kind of realize that it makes our games better, or it even might keep us from continuing on with a game that needs to be shelved or that needs to be totally reworked. Um, but I think for most people, it kind of becomes clear early on that there are kind ways to give
Mhm.
feedback, and there are sort of needlessly brutal ways to give feedback. Um, and I think most people choose to give the kind of feedback that they want to receive. And so I think that's part of another one of the reasons why this community in particular is so kind and uplifting is because we're all going to be taking turns giving and taking feedback, and you know I think the golden rule sort of applies here. We're going to want to treat people kindly when we're assessing their games because we know that in half an hour they're going to be looking at mine a lot of times.
Um, Not a lot of people get into the board game to get filthy rich. I think yeah, we'll all laugh at that one because the margins are very slim. And so I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that a lot of the positivity comes from passion driving game designers rather than profit?
Yeah, I don't know. I've thought about this a little bit. I mean, this doesn't apply to me because I'm rolling in my hissy fit millions over here. So no, but seriously, I think there's plenty of like examples of hobbies and industries and disciplines and art forms where the communities are much less kind than ours that are also sort of passion that might be kind of passion based. So I don't know. I kind of feel like what we've got here is a little bit of lightning in a bottle. There are just some amazing individual communities, and I think they sort of outshine the bad ones. So, like I said, I mean, I'm sure there are places in the board game design space that aren't the best spaces, but there's so many good ones. It's like, why would anybody stay with one of those?
Right?
There's so many great alternatives where you can go and just be really supported. Um, but I don't know. As far as the passion versus profit, I know that there are plenty of people like Sin, as Sin pointed out, probably being a top example of someone who's making part of their income from their designs, their hustle, having gone out and found the channels to get their games out into the marketplace. Um, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that's? I'd be curious to hear you guys' insights on the passion versus profit influence on the kindness of the community, if you think it exists.
I think you're kind of hitting a nail on a head. I'm not sure it's the nail on the head, but it's definitely one of many nails that I think because it is such a passion project for many, many people. And you even see that in the way people answer questions on, say, an online forum like BGDL. The people who are hardcore into it and this is part of their income, they're going to answer things quite differently than somebody who is like, I'm doing this as like a hobby. I don't even care if this ever gets published.
Right.
There's that very very big spectrum of difference between those people, and I think that that should be allowed. And I don't know if anyone is more of a game designer than the other. I think some people just rely more on it for like putting food on the table than others. And so, yeah, I do think that the the realm of hobbyist game designers, and most of us start that way because until recently game design really wasn't a profession that you went into, really wasn't a trade school or a
Right.
university level degree that you got and said, I am now a game designer. And so we get a lot of people who have established careers already, who have, you know, personal income, wealth from other aspects. And it's not surprising to me personally that for the longest time, most of the game designers were, you know, older, wealthier white dudes, right? There's no surprise on my face
Right.
when I look at the demographics. Say, oh yeah, that's who has the time, who has accumulated the wealth, who doesn't have to take care of the house and the children, who can travel without being strip searched and body cavity searched. All these
Indeed.
things, like, it all matters, right? It
For
all
sure.
makes a difference to somebody, whether or not they can be involved in this typically usually welcoming hobby, right? And it percolates down to players as well, because usually designers come out of the player pool.
Uh-huh.
It's like
Yeah, for sure.
they've played so much, they go, I can do this. Why don't I do this?
Right.
I've yet to meet a designer who's never played a board game. I'll just put it out there,
Fair enough.
right? Who wasn't a board gamer first. So yeah, I mean, I do think that there is a good correlation between the things that you're talking about, right? That um, we have a bunch of people who have almost the luxury of not needing this for their job, not needing this for their primary source of income, that they can give back, they can help
Yeah.
other people and not feel like they're sacrificing themselves. I will say though that this can be counterproductive for the profession as a whole. I'm just putting on my TTGA hat. And there's definitely been times that I've personally said, "Yeah, publisher, I can take a little less because I want the game to do well, and I want you to put that into marketing, and we'll take more at the other end of it. Like we'll build an escalator clause." But I also am not a person who has to worry about my rent,
Right.
right, or car payments because of this game succeeding or not, right? Whereas people who are in it and that's all they do, maybe my taking a percentage lower is now saying that's now the standard. Not that
Mm.
Sen is the standard, but if enough of us do that, then
Yeah,
it
that's a good
does
point.
become kind of the standard. So I do think that there are pros and cons of having this. It's not laissez-faire because it's not that we don't care. It's just that there there are a lot more safety rails
Yeah.
when you have another job,
Yep.
right?
No, it's
Very
a
few
great
people do
point.
this as their own job, the only job.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah, I you asked if I was exposed to any other industries where things were different, and my first career for 20 plus years was as a video editor. So I actually worked in that industry for decades, and things have changed a lot in that industry. As you can imagine, AI is changing it a lot, and even just desktop nonlinear editing systems have changed it a lot from when I was a video editor. And the only people who could engage in video editing as a profession were people who were employed by multi-million-dollar facilities where the equipment was very expensive and took up a lot of room and took a lot of special training. And I think that I've seen this exact thing happen a lot in the video editing space, where the people who are trying to make a living doing that um, are having to settle for less and less, and it just lowers the bar. And so I think your point's very well taken, Sen, that we have to be careful um, about being um, too uninterested in maintaining a high bar for the industry,
Yeah.
and making sure that people who need to make a living at it are going to be able to. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I
Sen.
mean, as we democratize things. Sorry, go ahead, Hafiz.
No, no, you were riffing. Go for it.
Oh, I was just gonna say, as we democratize things through the use of technology, like video editing is a perfect
Hmm.
example, right? I have the power on this crappy laptop in front of me because I have Adobe Suite. I could come up with something, because I also have some skill in the area, that would be reasonable. It's
Sure.
not as good as what you can do with the professional machines and all the skill and all that kind of stuff that people with exactly training have, but it's also passable
Hmm.
for mass consumption at like a YouTube level,
Right.
right? So it is similar to what we're seeing with AI now for every profession almost, right? That we're going to have this real reckoning, I think, with technology in terms of what jobs is it going to take if we let it.
Right.
Um, so yeah, it's very funny that really all I want AI to do is wash my clothes and clean my floors and mow my lawn,
Right.
Yeah,
but
we
it's
wanted to do all
apparently,
the we
yeah,
wanted
doing
to
all
do
the
all the
art.
manual work, and
Exactly.
now it's taken over all the art, which like we want to do that part.
Yeah, yeah.
Indeed.
Um, so sorry, Hafiz, you were going to say something before.
Yeah, so Sen had mentioned that you hit one of the nails on the head, and it seems as though there's no secret sauce. There's no one thing that creates a community that's a positive community, because communities are made of lots of different people. So there's lots of different attributes that come across that help make it what it is. And before we actually jumped on the live, we were talking about this idea of paying it forward. And what are your thoughts on how that ties into what you mentioned earlier? Like, we have so many people involved in giving their time voluntarily to help support a game. Where does this idea of paying it forward fit into the game design space?
I want to answer that, and I want you to remind me. Don't lose track of it because I'm an old man and my memory is terrible. So I'll lose track of it. But I want to bounce off one thing you said there first, which is that we kind of don't have control over making a community into a positive space. And I think I'm going to disagree with you a little bit there, because I think that what we can do as the curators of these spaces is to exhibit leadership,
Mm.
and not tolerate toxicity and negativity in these spaces. Um, I'm a moderator now of the BGDL group, which has been a lot of fun and a lot of frustration. But I really admire Gabe Barrett for what he's built in the BGDL community, and I think that uh, he has shown a lot of leadership in keeping that as a positive space. When Levi and and I'm not trying to put us forward as some kind of role model or anything like that, but we recognized as we were building a community around our crowdfunding effort, that we had to take a lot of control around keeping it a positive space. We would run contests and things, and sometimes people would get a little a little out of hand, getting a little carried away with how they were interacting with contests and stuff. And um, you just have to have robust rules for behavior in your community. I just really believe that this is critically important if you want to keep a community healthy and positive and uplifting for the members. You have to have robust rules, and you have to be willing to take the hard steps to enforce the rules. If that means disciplining people by giving them warnings, if it means kicking people out, um, and this is really hard for me because I want to be a generous person. I want to give people the benefit of the doubt. I want to give people second chances, but you also have to keep the larger community and the health of the larger community in mind when you're enforcing the rules. And I also think it's super important for the rules to be flexible, and to be responsive to the needs of the community over time. We've had, as I'm sure both of you guys are acutely aware, the AI discussions in the BGDL forum have been just a lot. It's been a lot to moderate, and there have been times when the way that those could have. Well, let me start over. There have been times when the profusion of that kind of conversation and the negativity that it spawned in the community could have threatened to, kind of tear it apart and create a lot of bad feelings. And everybody might not agree with how Gabe and the mod team has decided to handle things, but I feel like we've adjusted the rules. We've been very clear about what's allowed and what's not allowed, and we've tried to be really consistent about enforcement. And I just think that's um, my example aside of that particular issue. I just think that doing that in a thoughtful and rigorous way is really really core to keeping a healthy, positive non-toxic community.
Hmm.
And now please remind me of the question that you originally asked me, Hafiz.
Yeah, paying it forward. Like we
Yeah,
have so many great people, and we were talking about paying it forward just before we went live. And
yeah.
so, what role does that play in these spaces?
Well, I think it's really critical, and I think that, but I don't think it's something that we have to instill so much. Like I almost think that especially in this community, for some of the reasons we've talked about already, about how reliant we are on each other. It's just a natural. It's sort of a natural part of our DNA. Another reason that as I was thinking about this topic for tonight, that I kind of made jotted in my notes was that I think part of the positivity around the board game design space is that, as Sin mentioned, we're not just designers. We are virtually all. I mean, let's just go ahead and say we are all gamers and game players. And I think that this activity is sort of unique. Um, it requires us to have good relationships with the people at our table in order to in order to succeed. We can't do our hobby if we don't have good relationships with the other people who are at the table playing with us. And we have to, in order to enjoy our hobby, we have to be able to teach uh, other people at the table of different skill levels who might be different than us in a lot of ways. We have to teach them how to play the game,
Hmm.
and being able to do that in a kind way that you have to be able to get through the teach and have them still be enthusiastic about playing the game when the teach is over. So I feel like there's just a lot of stuff in the DNA of gamers who have turned into game designers that predisposes them to be positive and helpful and uplifting to the other folks who are involved in the hobby.
Yeah, at least many of them. There are definitely little pockets here and there of like darker forces at play. Let me just say that as someone who's been involved in this business for many years, decades.
Of course.
Mapacat says paying it forward in this community, in his humble opinion, pays way more dividends than other communities, and I believe that to be true. Yes, no good deed goes unpunished, but also good deeds in this community actually are rewarded as well. So it's an interesting thing. Like if we're going to talk about empathy and altruism and all those things that are part and parcel of paying it forward, the concept of altruism is such that you should not expect anything in return. And Matt's saying like, well, you'll get stuff anyways. I don't want anybody here who's listening to say, oh, I should do stuff so I get things in return. But it does work that way, right? If I play test your game, you're more likely to play test my game. It's just kind of human nature at a certain level. And if somebody breaks that social contract, whether or not it's written in the code of conduct for that event, you're not going to want to hang around that person. You're not going to want to test their game again. You're not going to want to be with them again. And that's the thing that I think a lot of us as game designers really enjoy is seeing the same people at conventions at different parts of the world, different times of year, running into Chris at a con, running into Hafiz at another con, and saying, hey, buddy, what's up? How's your game doing? Right? Can I play that game again? Or have you made changes? I really want to see it. And it's that being interested in each other's progress that I think is quite different than other communities where there is a little more competition. Even though
Yep,
there's only so many contracts available in game design, you can also just go self-publish and be your own contract, right, Chris? Chris has done it.
that's right.
Hafiz has done it,
Here, here.
right?
Get in there.
We're
But
Absolutely.
getting there. Yeah.
also builds on what we talked about earlier too. Like I'm just thinking about the times that I've gone to proto spiels. Um, I'll get a play of my game in, but I'm actually just more excited to go play other people's games. Like there's been times where I've shown up with 4 or 5 games in the bag, and I might take one out
Yeah.
because I would much rather go and see all the other cool things other people are doing, because it's inspiring. Like going and playing other people's games gets me jazzed up to want to be a game designer.
Yes.
And so it might not be like transactional where I play your game, so you're going to play my game. It could be very much like, oh, there's this group of people that are very like-minded, and we can nerd out
Yeah.
about the same. We could get so excited that a die rolled the number two when we needed it to just roll that two at that right time, and then everyone can celebrate together.
Yeah, Matt's saying here that it's natural. It's just a natural result, not something you go and look for. And he also said that all of his best friends are the people that he sees at cons, not the ones in his hometown. And I'm kind of taking umbrage to that because I haven't seen Matt in a while, so I guess we're not best friends, Matt. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because I am socially exhausted after convention. Socially, like my battery's drained because I'm really quite an introvert. But creatively, my batteries are recharged by going to conventions. So it's that pro and con. It's a good thing. It's a bad thing, but it's definitely worth it. I'm gonna be so tired after breakout. By the way,
But you're going to go back
uh,
to back. So you're going to be flying, going to a conference in Vancouver, then coming back here and doing one here. Um,
did I ever tell you about the time I flew back from Baltimore to a con? That's
oh,
happened
God.
before. I went to
Oh,
a con in Baltimore and then went to a con in Toronto that night that I got back from a con in Baltimore. So those things
that's
do happen,
wild.
right?
No rest
Yeah.
for the wicked.
Yeah, I guess not. Um, so in terms of a lot of those things, like when we talk about code of conduct, when we talk about that stuff, there's also a lot of unwritten rules. And I think what we've seen in this community anyway is not to be uber political, but a lot of people who value empathy. And there's a lot of us. There's at least three or four of us who, if you asked us at any given time, and we're all professionals in the industry, I'm talking like me, Brian Neff, Aaron Donna, and Chris, um, people who work for restoration, people who work for Forest Pruzan, which was then Funko. So people who professionally develop and design games as their career. All of us say empathy is the number one skill you need as a game designer. And I think when you have a bunch of people who are trying to, whether they know it or not, work on their empathy, maybe that's why we get a community that is, for the most part, quite good at listening to other people, right? Hopefully, except for AI, as Chris mentioned. Um, right. So that's one of the most divisive things that's happening in the community. Like, who cares about
Indeed.
D20s versus D6s? We're talking AI versus no AI. Um, but yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about that kind of sentiment. Like if we were gonna say there are quote unquote thought leaders in our industry, a lot of them talk about things like, a rising tide raises all boats, right? I'm not going to assume that people are being evil when we could just attribute that to ignorance, and we could teach them and we could make it a better place because they're a person that's worth having around. So I think there's a lot of places like that or spaces like that where people have been at least for the most part. Again, I know some places or some stories where people don't feel welcome because of certain actions that people have done or inaction or just not being as empathetic as they probably could have been, should have been to certain situations because it wasn't them or didn't affect them or they're not the demographic that's affected. But as we work on hopefully becoming more empathetic, I think we're going to see a community that is thriving, right? That is lifting each other up as much as possible. That does pay it forward, and I think we're there for in a lot of ways, but there's obviously still room for improvement.
Well said, Sin. And while I take back the talking stick, let me just say thanks to Matt for his comments. Good to hear from you, Matt. An amazing board game graphic designer, and it looks like I don't really know how this platform works so much, but it looks like there's a lot of folks in the chat. Thanks to everybody who showed up for this.
Yeah, Luke is here from Vancouver. I'll see Luke in 2 days. It's 3 days, baby. A couple other people as well. So it's great to have them here live and making content and comments. Hopefully they make content as well.
Uh-oh, I think we lost you for a moment there, Sin.
Oh, it's okay. I'm here.
Oh, you're back now. Yeah. Um, it's actually quite phenomenal when you think about it, because we were bantering back possible things to talk about, and one thing that Chris you brought up was there's thousands of games that come out every year now. Whereas if you go back and you look at the numbers from say even the 80s, that it was in the dozens of games coming out, but now it's like 5,000 games per year, and it's a very highly competitive space. But despite that, you're getting people not trying to one up one another or put others down, but as Sen mentioned, the rising tides raising all ships, and it almost seems counterintuitive that a space that can be so competitive can also be so supportive and collaborative.
Yep, absolutely. I think that I mean, I think we said this in a couple of different ways, but I'll just say it in one more, which is that, I think that the activity that we do as designers, I mean, so much of it is about showing our work and getting feedback. And I think it teaches us, it trains us in a couple of ways, and it trains us in a couple of very specific skills that I think directly sort of translate into online kindness and community mindedness, community uh, kindness, ways of wanting to lift each other up. It trains us to have thick skin, a little bit to what Sin was saying, and not taking things personally. It trains us to be appreciative for the generosity of others, to spend their time to look at what we've done and to give us their thoughts on it. And it trains us to sort of want to give as much as we get, or more. And so I think that generosity mindset, that sort of abundance mindset of, uh, you know, there's not a limited amount of goodwill out there. There's not, even though there may be a limited number of games that get published, there's not a limited amount of benefit that we can get from sharing our work, from helping others share their work and helping others improve what they're doing. And so I think that just sort of embracing that abundance mindset of I can give infinitely, and it's not going to diminish what I have. It's only going to increase what I have. And
That's
so
a yeah,
I
a
think
really
that's
good way of
important.
looking at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, love it. Another thing that is true is that even though there are 5,000 games released every year, there's a growing market,
Hmm.
which is weird to think about, right? But if you consider that board games are quote unquote a luxury, right? They're not something everybody needs to have, not something well, I would argue that they do. As a psychology professor, I'm saying right now that people need to play or at least be playful in what they do. And games are a really good way of doing that, obviously. Come on. But as the markets expand, I think there's even more opportunity to get more product out there for the discerning gamer, right? Is Hissy Fit going to be the monopoly killer? I can only wish, right? We can only
Yes.
hope. And not even financially. I'm just talking like game mechanics wise. But also, we know that's probably not going to happen. But there are certainly people out there who, unless you got the game in front of them, they'd never know Hissy Fit existed,
Right.
but they want to play it. And I think the marketing or the market being opening up in different parts of the world that are coming up to speed with, say, the Western world. Hate to talk about it that way, but you know what I mean. In terms of having some disposable income, some space at a house or a cafe. The cafe model is actually something that is helping board gaming proliferate in different parts of the world where people might not be able to afford the space or money or even just humidity
Hmm.
to own
Hmm.
that game. But if you can put all those games in a climate controlled cafe that serves food and beverage and allows you to play games, they're getting exposed to it. I think that's really part of the other thing that happens with this community is that as we recognize that our market in America and Europe and Canada and most of that area, Germany, the game playing parts of the world, predominantly being some of those countries. Now we're seeing a lot more activity in Asia, and we're seeing conventions come up in South America, in Africa, right? So I think there's a lot of potential for market outside of the traditional hobby space for people to want games. And are those 5,000 games that get made every year sticking? And the answer is, of course not. Of course they don't stick. There's probably like a few hundred of those games that actually survive to the next year, to the F1 and the F2 generations, if any of you are in biology. Um, and that's, kind of what we're looking at. Like, what games get that second, third, fourth, fifth print run? That's
Hmm.
what we need to be talking about, not necessarily the 5,000 games that get put out every year, because a lot of that is just, stuff that's thrown at the wall, and we'll see if it sticks. But then there's some that are designed specifically to be sticky, and that's a very different story there. But anyways, so yeah, in terms of our topic tonight, Matt Playground says this. Oops, sorry, there it goes.
Fantastic. Always nice to meet a fan.
There you go. Right.
Thank you, Matt.
And
Appreciate it.
I think, in all the stuff that we're talking about today about community and community building, my biggest wish for everybody is to find that community for yourself. Like, whether it's online, whether it's in real life, whether it's people you don't know, whether it's your best friends or people who become your best friends, even better. I think that's my one wish for everybody, is to find your people. And then the second wish is to, think about that whole concept of empathy and developing that as a skill to help you design better games, right?
Here,
So
here.
that's about it for me. Hafiz, what do you got to say about it at the end?
I mean, I can't top that. So I wonder if we can get our final words of wisdom from Chris.
Oh gosh.
Sure.
Sure, put me on the spot. Yeah, I
We
think
told you.
I know, I know. I actually think about this a lot. I think about, or I listen to several podcasts that ask a variation on this question, and so I think about it occasionally. What are my gaming wisdom thoughts? And I think we've really covered so much of it. I mean, you guys picked me for this topic because it's true to my heart, and this is the wisdom that I would want to share with everyone, sort of regardless of the topic, and that's be generous. Be generous towards each other, be kind towards each other. In this space, make communities. I wanted to have a group to play more games with. I realized as a designer, I just wasn't playing a lot of games, and so I went on Meetup, and started a Meetup board game group in my area, and that was several years ago. We have 300 members now, so um, you know, it it can be scary. It can push you outside your comfort zone, but go out and reach out to people and start to build community with the folks that you share interests with, and I think it will pay lots of dividends, both in terms of good stuff happening for you, because the more good that you put out into the world, I believe, the more you get back, and also just because it's there's no cost. I don't feel there's any cost to being generous generally, to being certainly no cost that isn't outweighed by the benefit that you gain from being kind to those around you, and really trying to create fellowship with folks around you, around activities that you all love. So I
Hmm.
think that's probably going to be my words of wisdom. Although in that spirit, I am going to take a moment to be generous to a project in particular. My good friends at Dead Alive Games, Brendan and Bernie, and designer Skippy Brown, who created Lunar Rush. Their expansion is on Kickstarter, and I think they've got 2 days left. So I will
Check it out.
express generosity and spread the word, and hopefully they are going to really succeed big with their project, because Skippy is in my playtest group, and so very excited always to see the folks that I playtest with bring their stuff to life. So
Hmm.
yeah, good luck to them.
Yeah. Rising tide rises all boats.
Here,
And
here.
for those of you out there who, you know, I was telling Chris before, like, I would rather my friends tell everybody that they're connected to about my game instead of backing my game and not talking about it, right?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Do
100%.
both. Like if you back my game, definitely talk about it. But if you can't back my game because finances are a thing, or you don't play games, you don't like the
You
game,
bet.
if you can at least talk about it because one of your friends might like it, right? I think that's really important to understand. That's like the low cost. It doesn't cost a lot except maybe time to be kind. And
Here,
kindness
here.
is not the same as being nice, right? Kindness is very different. All right. So if you want to hear me pontificate more about things like kindness, you can reach out to me at Senfeng Lim on Blue Sky. Hafiz, where are you at?
I am on Instagram at Printer Inc. Games. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, and you can reach out to both Hafiz and I at Maple Syrup on all the things. Chris's website is on his shirt, I believe, but also here, stoneagedistractions.com. I like the rough hewn dice you got going on there.
Oh, thanks.
You
Shout out
can,
to Drew Corkle, another amazing graphic designer. He helped
yeah,
design my logo. Yep.
there you go. And you can find out how to support this show. Keep the lights on at patreon.com/Meeple Syrup. Hey, Hafiz, who's on next week?
We actually have Gabe Barrett on next week,
Oh,
so it's great. We mentioned him today. He actually came up in a previous conversation because of his game Football U.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
and he works with Drew. Drew does a lot of the graphic designs for his campaigns and his
Correct.
games. And a shout out, since we're paying it forward, Gabe has his Game of the Month on GameFound, and
That's
it
right.
just went live yesterday.
Yeah.
So if you like solo games, also go check out Gabe solo game of the month. Solo games of the month on GameFound.
Excellent. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. We'll see you guys next week. Gabe Barrett here, BGDL, Maple Syrup. Let's see you then. Bye.